let's get started. Welcome. This is a track where we're going to be focusing on the human aspects, leadership, collaboration, environments, as well as operations, maintenance, all the human parts of controls. We'll cover, the track covers tools, processes, and analytics used to effectively support control systems over their full life cycle. I'll remind the speakers that you have 15 minutes total. You'll get a verbal note when there's 2 minutes left in your talk, and then we're reserving 3 minutes of time for questions. But we're going to stick hard to the timeline so that people can move on to the next track. So first, we have Andy Getz. He's the software group leader at ESRF in France. His main occupations these days are management, supporting Tango, and research data management. He'll talk to us about the Tango controls collaboration status. So if you'll share your screen, Andy, and take us away.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? You see my screen?
We hear you, don't see the screen yet. Yes, there we go.
And now you see some green thingies?
It's lovely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt. Let me start my talk as well, that I don't lose time. Yeah, I'll be speaking about the human aspects of the Tango controls collaboration. As chairman of the collaboration, I get this honor every 2 years. Well, now almost every 2 years. And I will also, at the end, just mention a few words about what we call the Tower of Tango. So if you can't read Chinese, the words in Chinese there are Tango Dao, which means the road to Tango. And if I have enough time, I'll spend a slide on that. And yes, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers. Even if we couldn't come to China, it's been fantastic to get familiar again with some Chinese culture. And so I spent some of the time preparing for this meeting, reading the Tao Te Ching, which I can highly recommend as a meditative exercise if you want to read about Chinese philosophy. It's amazing how after 3,000 years, it's still very applicable today. So what is the collaboration? The collaboration at Tango is how we keep the Tango effort going and making sure that everyone has, that there's nothing that's sort of blocking people if they're using the toolkit. The way it's run is we have 11 members, and these members are all facilities in Europe, and they contribute financially every year. We've been doing this for 5 years, and at the end of last year, 2020, the contract that we had came to an end, and we decided, because it's been beneficial, to carry on for another 5 years. So we've renewed it for another 5 years, and we have now something in place which allows us to carry on for this until 2025. One thing we did with this as well is we rely on commercial companies for support. And so we wanted to ensure that these commercial companies also have something which keeps them interested for the next 5 years. So we actually set up long-term contracts of support with these 4 companies. And we're looking forward to working. One of them is new to us, Observatory Sciences, but the other 3 we've worked with in the past. So we have something. And just to motivate also why we need this kind of support is you've maybe seen at the conference that there's a number of new projects like LOFA in Europe. There's also in Russia, Jinnah. In China, there's a Pepsi laser. SKA, of course, is a very big project. And then there are other projects which have just finished. And all of these want Tango to carry on for another decade or so. So we have to ensure that these things don't just depend on individuals, but depend on the collaboration. Certain things, as you know, I mean, migration is obviously a problem for many people. And even in software, we also have to migrate. So we've actually moved twice already. We went from SourceForge to GitHub in 2016. And now in December 2020, we moved to gitlab.com. So gitlab.com, the move was triggered by the fact that the Travis CI support became paying or non-free for open source projects. So we moved to GitLab because we found we could have moved to GitHub Actions, but we decided GitLab was closer to our DNA. And we also all have GitLab instances, so it was easier to move as well. And we've been very kindly accepted as an open source project with what's called gold status. So there's a post on this. Then we have the first class languages, where these are the main languages used inside Tango. So in C++, there's been a major release. This is managed by the lead developer is Renald Bortenbourg, and he's assisted by Michael from S2 Innovation and Thomas from Byte Physics. And these people have been doing an excellent job refactoring, bug fixing, many issues solving over the last 2 years. It's always amazing how even after 20 years, Tango is now 20 years old, there's still stuff to fix there. There's always things to improve there. Then Python has become the most popular language inside the Tango community. And there we helped by Anton, who is the lead developer for Python. And he's also provided Conda packages, which has made it much easier for people to install. And with Java, we have Gwen from Soleil, who has improved, done refactoring. And also Bintray, I don't know if you know Bintray shut down. So we had to move to Maven Central, which is probably more general, more natural for Java applications. In terms of progress also for Pogo, we also see people now retiring. So we've managed to, actually 3 of the main developers retired last year and this year. And these have been replaced by new young developers who have at least another 20 years ahead of them, I hope. And so we're ensuring the continuity with these tools. A big step forward is also with the packaging. So RPMs are now built on the Fedora platform, and Conda packages are being provided by Benjamin Bertrand, which I think makes a lot of people's lives easier because Conda sort of just works out of the box. This is something that's running on, this is only for Linux for the moment, and we'll be supporting Windows in the future. The web is, of course, still easing its way into our control rooms and replacing Swing and Qt, which is, I think Swing seems to be a logical step because Swing is now deprecated. Qt, there's still discussion, should you move to Qt or web, but we at ESRF also, but in all the other new facilities, we see web is really the way people are going. And what has become the most natural way of actually talking to a Tango system is via GraphQL. So, you know, there's REST and then came GraphQL, and GraphQL allows you to do queries in a more powerful way for the information that you need. And this adapts better to a control system. There was a very nice post on Monday by Jean-Luc Ponce, and I recommend you have a look at that, and there's a talk on Friday. So we're seeing even now multiple implementations of the GraphQL backends, and for that we need to standardize the protocol. Then there's been a new language on the block, what I call new kid on the block, Rust. So we have a new binding for Rust. This was developed by Georg Brandl and relies actually on the C binding, which was developed many years ago as a workaround for old C programs. Has now become like very interesting again. And this is used to bind to Rust. If you don't know if you know Rust, but Rust is a popular language which is supposed to protect you against memory leaks. And according to most experts, over 50% of our bugs are due to memory leaks. So Rust is sort of offering this kind of protection, which is becoming more and more interesting even for the Linux kernel. And I think we're going to now extend the C binding to make it also more modern. Yeah, you get an example of a small program. And yeah, this is something you have to learn. It's a new syntax, and I'm sure all of you could probably read this better than I can, but something with new, there are also new constructs in it, the way it handles exceptions and so on. And then unbeknown to us, we found this out very recently, is that someone found the C binding, the Rust binding, and developed their own tool, which looks like, I think, something called Midnight Commander, if you've ever known that. And this allows you to browse an entire system by introspecting the database and then going to talk to any device. And this was done by Johan Fenter from SARAO, who has developed a very nice tool which especially for people who like to use the command line more, this is much more powerful than clicking with the mouse. Yeah. Logging has also been seen interest over the 2 years, where people have been working on a global approach to logging so that you can also debug things. And there's a talk on this by Saro again on how to tag logs so that you can then search them on a global scale. Yeah. For very large systems, this is very useful. Yeah. And finally, the last thing we've been working on is the Tango V10. So we've been capturing all of the behavior of Tango in what's called requests for comments, RFCs. And these were done mostly during the pandemic, so very much while we were all remote. We now have a set which are documented, and we're going to now have to meet face to face as soon as we can meet again. To review these to ensure that everyone agrees on how they've been written. Yeah? And in 2022, we've decided this is at last the time, 10 years later, that we're going to develop a new code base based on these RFCs. Yeah? The community is still thriving. We were planning to meet in 2020 in St. Petersburg, but this was, this was not possible due to COVID. So we've had 3 online meetings, and we have also a new coordinator in Nicolas Leclerc, and he's replaced Jean-Michel, who retired. So we carry on meeting on a fortnightly basis to discuss kernel issues, and we meet now every 6 months online. But we're all dying to meet again face to face to catch up with people. What else has been happening since 2 years? Yeah. And yes, so the Tao of Tango this is the first chapter from the Tao Te Ching, which says that amongst other things, that there's an inner essence to everything, and there's also an outer aspect. And if you apply that to Tango, it would be the device, I think, is really the inner essence of what makes a Tango system. And the requests, the RFCs, capture the outer aspects. And by having the outer aspects captured, we can now re-implement them in a new language if we want. Yeah? And this is what we're planning for next year. To conclude, yeah, we keep on growing. I think this is also positive. It was a small system. We're amongst 2 institutes in Europe, in France, and now we see sort of moving out globally, which is, of course, encouraging. The contract has been renewed, so this is something which is also important as for me to ensure that we have some financial support. And yeah, after lots of talking, we now think we're going to have a prototype ready next year. And yes, that was the last word was in Chinese. I would like to say thank you to all these people who are co-authors and been contributing to this paper. And thank you to you. I think in Chinese, it's xie xie. Thanks. That
Very
I'm
good.
finished.
Thank you, Andy. We had one question in the Q&A. Does the Maven repository provide tools like HDBPP viewer and configurator, or Aster and Jive?
It provides Aster and Jive, but HDB HDPP is in a separate repository because it's an ecosystem on its own. And the move to GitLab is not complete. Yeah? So we started the move in December. So I think HDB++ is still waiting. We still have a bit of work to do to complete that. Yeah, but 3/4 of the repositories have moved. So it's around 70 repositories, and over 40 have moved. Yeah.
So I have a question. For me, how is the transition to bringing the young people on as the older people pass on their responsibilities? How is that transition managed, and is that going as smoothly as you hoped? Because this is something we're facing at JLab, and I think other labs are too.
Yeah. No, there was definitely even people were very worried that the original developers were retiring. Yeah, and actually, so what we did is we did put younger people on these tasks before the older people. Well, the people who were originally there retired. And actually, some people moved on, some of the older developers moved on to other projects before they retired. So this way, there was a backup while people were learning. But on the other hand, we've had new people coming in who never met the old people, the original developers, and they they actually learn very quickly. Yeah, you have to invest, but I think this hasn't proven. I mean, at the moment we got a smooth handover. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Hmm.
All right, thank you very much, Andy.
You're welcome.
Right. Okay, thank you, Andy, and congratulations. So let's moving on to the second talk of the session, given by Rommel, who is a database application developer at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in the US. And he will talk to us about a topic that affected us all, adaptation to COVID-19, how working remotely has made teams more effectively work together. Rommel?
Thank you. Okay, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. So my name is Romel Nacuara. I'm the database application team lead in the National Ignition Facility Integrated Computer Control System. So COVID-19 affected us in more ways than one. Today, I will share something positive that came out of this. All right, there you go. So here's a high-level view of our software release process. So software releases are done quarterly with 2 to 3 patches in between. So it requires a lot of effort from operations, hardware, and software teams. Each release consists of a database dry run and verification, deployment, regression testing, and a test shot. So the software release process is pretty standard. So what is the problem? So the pre-pandemic version of our software release involves a lot of group activities. Let me just move this thing, it's blocking. Okay, there. So yeah, it involves a lot of group activities, most of which requires the software team members to go to the control room to execute the release that to execute the task that they needed to do. With COVID-19 restrictions, that is the problem. So for example, before the release, we perform the database dry run. This is done in a team member's office. But after a successful dry run, we will go to the control room to verify the database release scripts have been delivered, and then that the control room, and then the console that we will use for deployment is working. So this is because the database, the production database, is accessible only from the control room. On the day of the release, we will be in the control room again to apply the database updates. So once the new software is activated, members of the software team will start coming into the control room to do regression testing. Since only members of operational staff are qualified to operate the laser, they will have to pair up with an operational staff to run a series of test procedures. The operational staff would sit at their console and then perform the required operation while they stand behind and observe software behavior, much like this picture here. Sometimes there are similar testing activities going on in other operator consoles at the same time, and you could imagine it could easily get crowded. All of these activities are coordinated by the release manager, who is also at the inside of control room himself. When the pandemic started, Lawrence Livermore went into a minimum safe operations in March of 2020. Only essential personnel are allowed on site. But when a month later, our April 2020 software release was canceled because the software team was not allowed on site or inside a control room. After some modifications to the control room operations to comply with COVID-19, NIF operations was able to resume in May of 2020. Then came the inevitable. The NIF required the features that are in our April 2020 release. The software team has to resume releases to the NIF control systems, but the software release process that required most of the team inside the control room is not possible anymore. This needed to be done outside of the control room. So NIF management met with the software team to figure out how to execute our process. While how to execute a release with the entire software team working remotely. So to make this work, we needed to develop a secure virtual access to the systems in the control room, basically to replace the presence of the team inside. So the first thing that we used is that introduced to the process is virtual desktops. So software team is able to continue development and testing activities remotely because they have access to development and testing environments. So to support production releases, NIF provided database team with virtual desktops. So the virtual desktops open secure connections to computers, databases, and servers in the production environment. So this replaced the need for database team to be in the control room to do database updates and verification. The next thing is the combination of smartphones and Cisco WebEx. So the NIF issued smartphones to each operational staff member, and then the software team leveraged a secure screen sharing capability using Cisco WebEx to view any operational console inside the control room. So the combination of these two provided a secure one-to-one audio-video communication between operational staff and the software team. So this replaced the need for the software team to be inside the control room during regression testing. Microsoft Teams provided a platform for the teams to collaborate online. So this replaced the need for the release manager to be in the control room to coordinate the release. So the release manager establishes a Microsoft Teams channel dedicated for each release, where our release activities and testing, qualification testing are organized as channel conversations. So this enabled him to get status updates from on-site and remote teams. He also shares the deployment schedule online in the release channel. So all these tools, a combination of these tools enabled software releases. So here is a picture of what depicts our software releases pre-COVID. And here is now a picture of what depicts our online remote releases. So in the new process, only essential personnel or essential operational staff are in the control room. The release manager, database teams, software team are working on their own workstations. There is a single WebEx meeting here that runs for the entire duration of the software release to coordinate all activities. When an issue comes up, remote and on-site teams simply join this online meeting to collaborate. There's also the release channel, which is available to everybody. So imagine if you were called in to help fix an issue, you can easily get accurate and up-to-date status by simply going into the specific conversation in the channel, and no time wasted asking what happened or what have other engineers have done so far. The deployment schedule is also shared online, so everybody knows which stuff has been completed, which steps have been are currently in progress, and what is still left to be done. So the COVID-19 restrictions forced us to rethink our software release process, and these adaptations has led us to a better and more efficient way of conducting NIF ICCS software releases. So we did our first remote software release a month after NIF operations resumed, so June of 2020, and we have done over a dozen more since then. So what are the benefits? The benefits have been tremendous to us. So the remote software releases met COVID-19 social distancing requirements and more. For the software team that used to crowd the control room on the release days, they now work comfortably in their own offices, whether on-site or remotely from home, which most of us do. They have access to their computers and developer tools that would have not been available if they were in the control room. So this is invaluable to any software engineer, this has made the software team more effective during the release. So they can respond much faster. Team availability increased because you don't have to be in the control room to help. For the operational staff who is in the control room, the reduced number of people made it a more comfortable working environment for them. They can focus more on the task at hand and not deal with the distractions if there was a crowd of software engineers in the room. And also, remote software releases facilitated online collaboration. So the online deployment schedule plus the status updates from the release channel increased team awareness and communications. So escalations and resolutions are also recorded in the release channel, and it makes data available for later analysis.
2 minutes.
Okay. And one unexpected benefit of remote releases is we were able to train new hires. So the member joins the video conference, the new hire joins the video conference and watch as the mentor executes the release procedure. So before this, we would have to bring the new member into the control room, which is not always possible. So now we have more opportunities to train them. So remote software releases provided us better coordination, communication, and documentation for the release. So that's the end of my presentation, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Romel. That was very interesting, and I think many of us can really relate to this situation that you have been going through, trying to facilitate the communication without really being close together and maintaining social distance. It was very interesting. So we do have one question in the chat. Will this new remote software release process remain in place post-COVID? Will there be any modification to the process?
Oh yeah, so yeah, that has been the question with among the software team when we started it, and yeah, it will. Management has been very happy with the results of remote software releases. Yeah, it will continue. So like I said, we have had 12 over a dozen releases since then, and we have been continuing using this process, and it will stay with us. We will continue to do software releases this way.
Okay.
It has been like a workforce multiplier, because everybody in the team becomes available during the release, not just the people inside the control room. So it became a team effort. It's easy to troubleshoot any issue because everybody is available. And yeah, the other thing we find is since the release usually lasts long days, like 24 hours, people join into the meeting even before their allotted time. So for their task, they join in, they listen in, and they become aware of the entire process.
Excellent. Thank you, Romel. Appreciate your contribution. Matt?
Okay, our third talk today comes from Catherine Baker from the STFC. She's a senior software engineer in the experimental controls team at the ICIS neutron and muon source in the United Kingdom. Today, she's going to talk to us about agility in managing control software systems. Please, Catherine, go ahead.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see my slides by now.
Yes, we can.
So I'm going to try and at least explain to you how we try and be agile in our own team. I will start by trying to make sure that we all know what agile means. So it'll be how I understand it, what a multifunctional team is, because certainly the experiment control software team at ICIS, which our product is ICALEPCS, we are multifunctional, and I'll explain how we work and how we employ agile methodologies and frameworks, and what we're trying and might try next. Yes, the photo is of me. Yes, I consider it valid for this because it's one of the proofs that we are multifunctional. That is admittedly an old photo, but despite being a software engineer, I still spend my time in the experiment halls, sometimes commissioning, testing, fixing things. Very rarely with motion these days, I'm pleased to say. So the first thing I'm going to highlight is that Agile is a methodology, not a framework. It's a way of thinking. You can't find a checklist that'll say, oh, I do these 5 things, therefore I'm Agile. You can do those 5 things and not be Agile, but so long as you're thinking Agile, you'll get the benefits of being Agile, even if the framework isn't. I'll try and explain that a little bit better. So Agile itself was a manifesto that came up from a group of software engineers that met in some mountains trying to figure out what wasn't working for them. They came up with this manifesto, and the general principle of it is that the items on the left are more valuable than the items on the right, but there is still value in the items on the right. This is why it's a methodology. You worry about creating working software over comprehensive documentation. A lot of people seem to think Agile means no documentation. No, it should still be sufficient. My experience is software, so I'll be focused on software, but it doesn't have to be limited to software. You can create anything you like. Any widget can be replaced for software in this. This manifesto led to a set of principles, which I'm not going to go into, which led to the frameworks. So those frameworks are names you might have heard, like Scrum, Extreme Programming. But these Agile Manifesto values are still applicable to even the old-fashioned waterfall method. Because if you're still talking to your customer instead of negotiating contract once you've started the work, you should hear about the change and be able to respond to it, because you can't plan now what might be needed in 6 months necessarily. But it depends on what you're doing. If you're building a house, once you've designed it, you probably can define what you need to be doing in 6 months' time. But that doesn't stop change happening. The one thing I will mention, which is a common tool used in the Agile frameworks, is the Kanban board. This is the only tool I'm actually going to try and describe, and I apologise to those who speak Japanese, because I think if I'm saying Kanban board, I'm saying display board, but it makes more sense to say Kanban boards to me in English. So the Kanban came out originally of the assembly lines at Toyota. They used it to track how their product was going through the process, so that they could see where there were delays, especially. Because if you know that you've got 10 things stopped at one stage in the process, you know it stopped, and then you can ask yourself why. One of the best things about this, there is this really satisfying feeling as soon as you move something to the final step in your process. Simplest board will be a list of things to do, things you're doing, things you've done. And that move into done, it satisfies me anyway. But that whole sort of, if you know you've got 10 things in one state that shouldn't be, it's a very quick and very visual way to see the status of everything without needing to go into the detail necessarily. So I'll now try and explain a little bit about what I mean by multifunctional team. So as far as this discussion goes, a function is a family of tasks. Teams can be focused on one task. It's not usually the case. Most teams manage a little bit of at least another one. Some teams cover lots more than just one task. So the types of function I'm thinking about Again, I'm going to be focused on software. You have development. Somebody has to write the code. You'll have systems. You'll have people who are looking after your network, the computers that the software runs on, the operating systems, where you physically put everything. You'll have operations. They'll be keeping the software up to date with the little rollouts that don't really require much dev work, just that security patch you have to do. And they'll fix the bugs that are found. They're the people who'll probably take the phone call when something goes wrong. Project management and admin can vary. Nearly every team will need some level of project management, and nearly every team will have some level of admin, but you can have more admin than others, especially when you think about things like systems, where you might also be managing who has access to what. So generally a multifunctional team will cover more than those, and just because you do development with a bit of project management doesn't make you multifunctional. That probably means you're just doing development. The biggest challenge for a multifunctional team will always be context switching. Because if you're focused on a development task and you get an operations phone call, you might be going from thinking in one language about one thing to having to think about something completely different. And it costs. It costs time, it costs effort, because most people can't multitask. You do actually have to sort of take that moment to, right, I need to forget what I was doing, remember this, and then you've got to go back to it later. And you might not remember where you got to. So there is a cost to context switching for a multifunctional team. My next little bit about knowledge being limited. A team can be multifunctional, but only one person in the team might be doing all the systems work. That makes the team multifunctional, but not all the team members. And if you've got a sysops team, you might have one person doing all the systems design and a few other people doing the operation side. So they have the knowledge. They have a small understanding of it, a thin layer of it, but they don't necessarily have the depth that they would need to fix something if it went wrong at a later date. So, a little bit about the ICALEPCS team and how we employ agile frameworks. The reason I speak the way I do is we are a SysDevOps team. We all have a hand in keeping things physically connected. We all look after computers to some extent. We're limited in which computers we look after. We only do the ones that control experiments at ICIS. So it's not all-encompassing. We don't need to worry about how to use Office or anything, but there's plenty of systems we do need to worry about. We're all capable of development, and you'll find a lot of us have contributed to the code base. If we haven't, it's because we've been too busy doing other things. And when the ICIS accelerator is running, we all take on the ops role. We all answer the phone when it rings to fix something that's gone wrong suddenly. When it comes to working in an agile fashion, we're based on Scrum. So we're always meeting with the users of our systems in various ways. We tend to stick to the scientists rather than the facility users, because otherwise we'd be trying to speak to far too many people. But that's all about the collaborating with our customers. So it's very much back to the Agile Manifesto. A lot of our process was based on Scrum, and I'm not going to give you much more than a whistle-stop tour of Scrum. But one of the things we do is we prepare a list of things to work on in a sprint. A sprint is a term used for Scrum, which is just the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, as the case may be. Our sprints tend to be 4 weeks. Meeting every day during the sprint to make sure everyone has all the support they need is an important thing again. It's part of that interacting. It's part of that making sure that everything's there and that we can actually produce the working software we need. We share what we've done at the end of the sprint in a review. We have a retrospective where we look back at what went well, what went badly. We respond to change, and that can be our internal processes as well as anything external. The sprints also allow us to respond to change quite nicely. But we didn't find Scrum worked for us out of the box. We had to do some adaptations. Ideally in Scrum, you'd release and deploy after every sprint ends. Well, we can't deploy after every sprint ends because we can't deploy every 4 weeks, because that doesn't work with a facility like ICIS. So we deploy when we can, and we only produce the releases then, so that we only do the full length of testing then. Ideally, we'd have a representation of our customers at every single one of our meetings. That's not entirely practical either, because we have a lot of customers. So instead, what we do is we meet with them in different ways, and team members take on some of that customer role from the Scrum side of things in our meetings. So it's the team that then champion the priorities for certain things. In the ideal world, only the work agreed up front gets done in a sprint. As in, you shouldn't be adding things midway through the sprint. That really doesn't work if you're an operations team. You have to add things partway through. And we do this. We accept it, we add things in as required. So the only constant in life is definitely change. I do like that quote that's attributed to Heraclitus. So there are some things we're trying differently at the moment. We're making our sprints
2
variable
minutes.
lengths. Thank you. We know there are some predictable times with heavy operational requirements, and we work hard to make sure that we're not trying to do all the end of sprint, beginning of sprint meetings at the same time. We're trying to change how we do our context switching so that we can focus on the science area, which means we might change some of what our priorities get to be. We're also looking at different ways of providing that prioritized list. So I'm looking to some of the scaled agile frameworks for that. Whilst the team doesn't need a scaled agile framework, the number of products we support really does. So the conclusion I have here, agile as a methodology, whatever framework you're using, agile or non-agile, is something we should all be thinking about, because it will encourage that collaboration. And Kanban boards are great tools to keep track of where things are going. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Catherine. So there weren't any in the Q&A. I have a question myself. How much do you try to influence your customers to adapt to your agile approach, or do you just expect all the adaptation to be done on the software side, and you sort of just work with the customers as they want?
A bit of both, because of the heart of the manifesto being that collaboration and that interaction, and that's what we've really tried to pick up. It doesn't matter who's trying to work what way. Most of our customers are quite happy for us to turn around and say, can we talk to you? Over talking to us once and then not talking to us for 6 months when we don't deliver what they want. So it's
so
go on.
Both ways. Okay, so a question from Bruno Fernandez. How far in advance are meetings with users occurring? That you mentioned input from users is more recurring than facility scientists. What is the role of scientists at those meetings?
Oh, when I say users, I mean our facility scientists. Our users are our facility scientists. Okay. We don't tend to think about our facility users. We can't. And those meetings, there are some that happen on a 3-monthly schedule. There are some that happen on deployments. There are some that happen monthly. There's the ad hoc meeting you have in the corridor when you're in person. We're always talking to each other.
Okay. And last one from, I can't pronounce his first name, Mannix. When you say that you reach out to customers in various ways, what channels do you use? Can you describe that a bit more?
We have a specific Teams channel that we use. Well, it's not actually a channel, it's a whole team in Microsoft Teams. We have so many meetings. We try to work with what already exists. But we do end up having a lot of meetings. We have drop-in sessions where people can come with questions, problems, advance notice. When we do release, we actually set up meetings to show people what we've been doing recently, make sure we capture anything that's coming up. It's just a continuous full-time job for people. I'm not sure I've answered that very well, okay, but I've done my best.
So I guess if you have want to get more from Catherine, reach out to her in person.
Yes.
That gets us to 9:15. The end of our session. I want to thank everyone for participating and Martin for co-chairing the session. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.